Hey everybody, it's Party Late here with another episode of Total Breakdown. Today we're going to see an absolutely ridiculous bit of carnage as Xiphos brings his High Elves to the field against the Dwarfs of Rightest. We begin of course with talk of composition and deployment, and it's pretty fascinating on both sides of the field. The High Elves are being led by Alariel the Radiant up in the air with these white lines of Xiphos building up the front line with their armor-piercing capabilities. Up front we also have the Great Eagles up in the air providing some support to that front line, and then at the back we have a pair of nobles, both of them atop chariots, making them anti-infantry and armor-piercing, while these Ithilmar chariot units on either flank will have a wonderful time just dancing around the dwarven formations, hoping to cause a fair bit of anti-infantry damage. On the other side of the field, the dwarves are being led by a Rune Lord on foot, and up front we have all of these miners with blasting charges hoping to slow down enemy charges as they try to close gaps, and behind them we have a lot of dwarf warriors spread about, providing a decent bit of protection as a second layer, able to push forward, but leaving some gaps so these Thunderers can actually fire through the gaps into the front lines. We also have these Ulthar's Raiders were able to fire through the gaps in the front lines as well, while at the backs you can see we have these Slayers and these Dragonback Slayers trying to prevent any flanking maneuvers or any charges from large enemy units, while all the way at the back we do have these Dwarf Warriors protecting this cannon unit that is already opening shots, trying to get some damage in to kick things off, firing away at these white lines of Xiphos on the right side of the High Elf formation. Not a bad call at all. The white lines of Xiphos are pretty deadly in the front line, especially up against the miners with blasting charges, so might as well cause a little bit of damage over here and take a look at the beauty of this wonderful headshot we get onto these white lines of Xiphos to kick off the damage. I'll see how it all breaks down as these armies try to close the gaps towards each other. You can see Alariel getting very adventurous already, moving forward. It's a dangerous move, of course. There are a lot of Thunderers on the field who can fire at these Great Eagles, as well as Alariel herself, of course. You can see just dancing around, waiting for the rest of the formation to catch up as these Great Eagles push off to the sides. Again, trying to cause some tension, I think, trying to cause some fear among the Dwarves. You can see the Dwarves pulling back a little bit, trying to prepare themselves to get some more shots from their cannon as well as their Thunderers. Of course, the cannon now firing away, I think, at the Ithilmar chariot on the right side over here. Not able to get a hit there, unfortunately, as this Eagle over here dives into these Thunderers, but you can see immediately getting shot down by the Thunderers right behind that first layer. So excellent placement there with these Thunderers trying to take care of this Great Eagle. We also have the Dwarf Warriors turning around alongside these miners with blasting charges, maybe trying to charge down that Great Eagle and finish it off right away. Meanwhile, over here you can see in the middle, Alariel is actually trying to charge in onto these Thunderers in the middle, and that is a terrible idea as she is being shot down by the Thunderers on multiple sides already. You can see she has taken about 25% HP damage. In fact, by the time she lands, it is at about 50% damage to her hit points. So this is a very, very dangerous decision that she's made there. And you can see off to the right side, meanwhile, we've got these Thunderers firing away at the Ithilmar chariot unit over here that's trying to close the gap and maybe get some charges in of its own, while the Great Eagle up here on the right side is looking for an opportunity to dive in, perhaps into these Thunderers, and prevent their shots from coming through. You can see on the left over here, the Great Eagle was driven off. It is trying to pull back and take to the air. These Thunderers continue to fire away at it though. And meanwhile, back in the center over here, you can see we do have Alariel again in a spot of trouble. She gets marked by Ulthar. She gets the Master Rune of Wrath and Rune on top of her. She uses the Star of Avalorn to try and stay alive, but look at her health drop as these Ulthar's Raiders turn around and start firing away at her. These Thunderers as well, just firing away. She tries to pull back into safety and tries to take to the air, but look at her health. She's in a terrible spot. That was an absolutely terrible decision. And up front, you can see as these charges are coming through, we do have the miners with the blasting charges, throwing those blasting charges, trying to get some damage done and trying to slow down some of these charges, but the Noble over here was able to cut through the front line and is able to push right through these miners with blasting charges, as are these Ithilmar chariots over here to the left that are just pushing through, I think chasing after these Thunderers to try and prevent all of that range support from coming through. And you can see the white lines of Xiphos have taken a touch of damage, but they are still going to push through that fire. They don't really care about the blasting charges all that much. It has slowed them down a little bit, but they're going to push through and they're going to cause a lot of trouble for these miners. And you can see Alariel over here routing, very low on health. Another volley from the Thunderers comes through and down goes Alariel. Leadership has already fallen for the High Elves, and you can see the Ithilmar chariot unit over here pushing in towards these Thunderers in the middle as the Noble manages to push through the Ulthar's Raiders. Is back over here. You can see the miners with blasting charges trying to slow down the Noble over there, but the charge comes in from the white lines of Xiphos, as on the other side of the field you can see the Great Eagle does dive in, but gets swarmed by these Slayers and the Dwarf Warriors. So a bit of a trouble spot over there as the chariots over here are able to push through these Dwarf Warriors, get caught up in the middle over here. The cannons are firing away at the Ithilmar chariot, but a little hard to hit these chariots as they move about pretty quickly. And you can see the Noble back here again pushing in towards the Thunderers over here, but being chased by these Dragonback Slayers. So a bit of a trouble spot for the noble, as up front over here you can see a beautiful charge from behind from this chariot as the White Lions of Xiphos hold these miners with blasting charges in place. The chariot just comes riding right through, tossing those dwarfs in the air. Long range tossing going on right now, dropping their health by about an additional, I think, 10 to 15%, but bringing their health and morale down to about 50% each. Meanwhile, on the left flank, you can see over here, these White Lions of Xiphos are engaged with these miners with blasting charges as well, and this noble over here has turned around and is pushing through these thunderers again, just trying to cause a tremendous amount of damage. Beautiful work over here, throwing these dwarfs back and up into the air and trying to take care of that ranged capability that the dwarfs have brought to the field quite wisely. These Dragonback Slayers, meanwhile, continue to give chase to this noble, hoping to just shut him down, but he's using Foe Seeker to keep that speed up, to keep that vigor up as well, and keep that distance as big as possible. As over here you can see on the right side, the Great Eagle is giving up on the fight, surrounded by Dwarf Warriors and Slayers both, but we do have the Thilmar Chariot coming in, trying to rescue that Great Eagle, just barely giving it some room so it can pull back, and then the Chariots turn around and drive through these Thunderers once more, as the Noble over here is being chased by the Rune Lord, again using Foe Seeker on this Noble as well, getting caught up against these Dwarf Warriors as well as the Thunderers, and you can see we have this Chariot unit now moving through these Thunderers once more, just causing a fair bit of damage, and the Cannon again looking for some shots, looking for an opportunity to get some shots in, while these Dragonback Slayers over here chase after the Noble, who in turn chases after these miners with blasting charges. These White Lions of Xiphos are going to hope to, I think, maybe shut down these Dragonback Slayers, as over here you can see that Great Eagle having a bit of a field day with these Thunderers, causing a great deal of damage. And the front line from the Dwarfs is more or less collapsing, shatters, routes across the board actually. On that left flank as well, you can see this unit is very close to routing. The center has given up, the center left has given up, and on the right over here as well, you can see a bit of a rout going on as these Chariots continue to push in and out of this clump of Dwarfs that are just waiting to get charged, trying to take care, I think, of these chariot units with those Slayers in that clump. As back over here on the left, you can see this Noble has done a wonderful job charging in through these Thunderers, as the Great Eagle kind of gets surrounded by the Thunderers as well as these Dwarf Warriors. So that Eagle is going to actually give up on the fight, as over here we have these Dragonback Slayers moving in towards these White Lions of Xiphos, trying to hold them in place, trying to protect those Thunderers, I think. And back over here you can see we have all of these Dwarf Warriors and Slayers moving up over here to try and pin down the Chariot as well as the Noble, as over here you can see we have an excellent use of the Master Rune of Wrath and Ruin on top of the White Lions of Xiphos, just trying to eliminate this very dangerous unit, but at the same time we do have that Chariot just charging through the trees into the side of these Dwarf Warriors up front and causing a devastating amount of damage, dropping their health and morale significantly. They're at about 25% apiece now, and you can see meanwhile on the left side over here these Thunderers try to continue firing away at the Noble over here, but again using Foe Seeker, that Noble turns around and is going to charge right down into the throats of these Thunderers, throwing them off the hill over here. Beautifully done, great charge. And back on the right side you can see we do have these White Lions of Xiphos engaged with these Dwarf Warriors over here, just holding the line. The Dwarf Warriors are not having the best time, as back over here you can see these Dwarf Warriors are giving up on the fight. That great little dwarf sandwich action was beautifully executed, as over here this Noble now turns around and gets a nice charge into these Ulthar's Raiders, as these Chariots charge through the Thunderers, push on through right into the backs of these Dwarf Warriors. So beautifully done there. And now you can see over here this Chariot unit turns around and gets a nice charge through these Thunderers over here, throwing them back and then trying to push through these Dwarf Warriors over here, getting kind of caught up by the Rune Lord, but in comes that Great Eagle as well, diving into these Thunderers, causing a fair bit of hurt over there, as this Noble is just barely able to pull back into safety with all of these Slayers and Dwarf Warriors giving chase. And this Chariot unit now turns around and is pushing towards the front line over here to provide some assistance to the White Lions of Xiphos over here, ultimately deciding to, wait a little bit, regroups a little bit, and then once again pushes back down towards this right flank to try and finish this engagement once and for all as quickly as possible. You can see these Dwarf Warriors are already wavering, but in comes that charge to seal the deal over here. Beautifully done. Great awareness, noticing that wavering front line and taking advantage of the opportunity, as over here on the other flank you can see we do have these Thunderers completely shattered. These miners with blasting charges trying to provide some assistance against these White Lions of Xiphos, but is it going to be enough? I hardly think so. Up over here you can see the Noble once again using Foe Seeker to turn around and charge right through Ulthar's Raiders over here, causing a fair bit of damage. These Chariots as well moving right through these Thunderers, and you can see they do get hit by marked by Ulthar, and that's going to be trouble for them if enough range units can actually focus down on them, but you can see they quickly turn around and pull away towards this frontline engagement to take care of these Dwarf Warriors who are already routing, but trying to finish that off, trying to turn it into a shatter. We do have all these Dragonback Slayers and Slayers though pushing down the hill, trying to pin these guys down, but you can see very good micromanagement over here, turning around and pulling away into safety. Now despite all this, ever since Alariel fell, the balance of power has not been in favor of the Elves, because the Dwarves still have a fair number of units that can cause a fair bit of trouble, and you can also see the Master Rune Rune of Wrath and Ruin is very capable in dealing damage, as the White Lines of Trace over here do get hit by it. The Rune Lord in combat, in melee over here, trying to take care of these White Lines of Trace, and you can see the Ithilmar Chariot here deciding better than to engage against that, and over here, the Great Eagle actually giving up on the fight because the cannon was able to fire a few shots at it, and it has completely shattered. Meanwhile, over here you can see the chariot again looked for an opportunity, looking for a place to dive in, as this chariot over here dives through these Ulthar's Raiders. Back on the right, you can see we do have these guys giving up on the fight completely. The White Lines of Trace hit by that Master Rune of Wrath and Ruin, not doing them any favors. As back over here you can see this chariot trying to finish this unit of Thunderers off once and for all. Very beautiful awareness there, noticing that unit and trying to shut it down before it's able to do any more damage. Is back over here you can see these chariots are taking some risks over here, engaging with Slayers and then pulling back, turning around and hitting these Dwarf Warriors. You can see Foe Seeker once more active on that Noble, and these Slayers decide to turn around and try to shut down these White Lines of Trace as they're trying to close the gap towards these Ulthar's Raiders, who do not want to die right now. They do not want to die a useless death, but take a look at this. These chariots are again turning around. They see an opportunity to charge through Ulthar's Raiders, and they're going to do exactly that. Beautiful work over here, cutting right through all of these dwarves, flinging them back and getting them to waver very close to, there it is, there's the route on Ulthar's Raiders, and you can see over here we do have all these Dwarf Warriors trying to close the gap over here. We've got the Rune Lord moving in as well, trying to hold the Ithilmar Chariot in place if possible. The cannon crew was able to get back on the actual equipment, but is that actually going to be worth anything right now? Only time will tell, as these Dwarf Warriors are beginning to waver as well. We do have these miners with blasting charges returning to the fight, but look at all of these chariots now turning around, moving towards this massive clump of Slayers over here that are just waiting to eat this charge. In come the chariots. The Noble decides to go through, but the other chariots decide to turn around and push through these Dwarf Warriors instead, as the other Great Eagle decides to return to the fight. And again, we do have a massive clump of Dwarf Warriors over here, miners with blasting charges, as well as the Rune Lord up there. So if the chariots turn around, as they're doing right now, and charge right through, they will be able to cause a fair bit of damage. You can see the Noble actually charging through these Dwarf Warriors, and the chariots decide to regroup, get a little bit of, patient play perhaps, charge in from multiple directions perhaps, and if we zoom out, we can see the White Lines of Trace over here having a bit of a field day against these Dragonback Slayers and these Slayers, as these Thunderers have returned to the fight as well, so these chariots are going to move in to try and finish them off, as the Noble drives right through some of these Dwarf Warriors over here. Gets a fair bit of work done, pops Foe Seeker, turns around and tries to pull away, as on the right you can see we do have these chariots again just riding right through these Thunderers, trampling these dwarfs, not giving a damn about their gunshots. But this chariot unit has taken a fair bit of damage. Its health bar is barely visible. It is now wavering, and same goes for the other unit as well. It just barely has any health left. So those chariots, those very powerful chariots, might actually drop. And the Rune Lord, you can see, still at full health. This Noble is in trouble. The White Lines of Trace are in trouble as well. So with some good management, that balance of power absolutely makes sense. These High Elves are still in a world of trouble if they aren't able to stay on top of their game. And you can see over here we do have actually the chariot unit over here giving up on the fight. They are routing up over here. These White Lines of Trace giving up on the fight as well. The Noble needing to pull back into safety, and you can see a terrible shot there from this cannon unit. An absolutely horrendous shot, a tremendous amount of friendly fire, and take a look at what that does. That is going in the book, ladies and gentlemen, as all of these Dwarf Warriors and miners with blasting charges decide that they're going to rout from the field. That cannon's friendly fire might have sealed the deal for the Dwarfs over here. You can see we've got these Dwarf Warriors turning around, but they're facing off against the Noble that's charging right through them. We have these chariots coming in from behind. The Great Eagle is coming through from behind as well, and the cannon is going to drop. The Dwarf Warriors are going to drop up over here. These chariots drive right through these Slayers and these Dragonback Slayers as well. The Rune Lord is trying to get some work done against the White Lines of Trace, and you can see that Eagle having a bit of a field day, blowing that cannon up, just dancing around from up in the air. And this chariot now, this Noble rather, turning around and crashing right through this clump of Dragonback Slayers. We get these chariots in from behind as well. A lot of work being done, and the Rune Lord being tossed around is not going to do the dwarfs any favors. The Rune Lord has to be on his feet to get damage out, and you can see when he is on his feet, he's getting a fair bit of damage out. These White Lines of Trace are very close to giving up on the fight. That Great Eagle as well, very close to giving up on the fight, but in comes another charge from the chariots as well, trying to scare off, or rather finish off these Slayers. They won't be scared off. Of course, they will fight to the end. In comes this chariot unit as well, tossing one specific Slayer down, and the Noble again comes through. The Rune Lord, though, turns around, tries to get some damage into this chariot, but in comes the Great Eagle once more, tossing the Rune Lord down. A great deal of damage being done in a tactical sense, preventing that Rune Lord from getting damage output. And you can see this Noble over here pops Foe Seeker, turns around, and tries to take care of this one last Dragonback Slayer that's left on the field. The Rune Lord, though, not willing to give up on the fight either, standing, fighting, trying to take care of as many grudges as he can, trying to bash that Eagle's skull in, but unfortunately fully surrounded by chariots. That Rune Lord stands no chance, and ultimately, he decides that he will give up and shatter for a Pyrrhic victory for the High Elves. Xiphos was able to micromanage a large number of chariots with great efficiency, trampling and riding down dwarfs of all shapes and sizes. The early loss of Alarielle was definitely far from ideal, and the balance of power was never in favor of the High Elves, but through excellent mobility and persistence, they were able to come out on top. The touch of dwarf-friendly fire didn't help much at the end either. As always, make sure you subscribe to this channel for more Total War content and keep sending in those battle replays. I do think it's one of the best ways to learn, and it's always nice to highlight such amazing battles from the community. I'd also like to thank all of my patrons and channel members for supporting the channel on a monthly basis, keeping us alive and running smoothly, and a massive thanks goes out to you for watching. I'll see you on the battlefield.